or you could search Chabad Ocala. I have a YouTube channel that has some videos available. The JLI classes are not public, but the YouTube channel, they are. There's some videos. Okay. Now let's go. So here we are, lesson number 5. First of all, welcome everyone that's made it so far through all these previous lessons. And now we're going to get quite deep. It's going to get kind of intense today, but in a good way, and always in a good way. So we tell a story about, we'll call him Josh. He was a very happy fella, but he was quite overweight. He would walk every day to work and always pass by a bagel store. And they had bagels and donuts. And every day he would stop by and have a bagel and a donut and a coffee. And his workmate said, "This is a problem, you just keep going by there and you just keep buying stuff." He says, "I can't help it. If I walk by it, I gotta go. I gotta stop in. I have no choice." So he said, let me tell you, there's a different route. Instead of taking Main Street, you can go down 3rd Avenue and you could walk down there and you can get to work the same way. So he says, "Okay, I'll go." And sure enough, he takes the other route. He starts driving down 3rd Avenue instead of Main Street, and for a little bit it works, and then he said, "But today I came one day and there was traffic on 3rd Avenue, and he walks in with this big donut and bagel, and his friend said to him, "What happened?" He said, "Well, there was traffic on 3rd Avenue and I had to take Main Street." He said, "Well, I was driving by and I said, I know." I said, "God, look, if you give me a parking spot right in front of the store, then I'm going to have to stop. I have no choice." He said, "Sure enough, I made a deal with God. And would you believe it? On the 8th time around, I found parking." Anyway, so let's take a look at some of what we've learned. Lesson 1, we introduced the basic human hunger for meaning, something that's deeper than comfort or success. Koheles captures the futility of a life rich in experiences, but poor in meaning. That was lesson 1. Lesson 2, we said that meaning on its own is not sufficient, but you also have to have purpose. It's not enough to just be focused on something that's meaningful in your life. Why? Because when you're focused on meaning is about me, right? The meaning, the me. So that's about me. If you want to have something that is truly meaningful, then you have to search for a purpose in life. Like the video we just saw of Rabbi Liraz, where it completely says, it's not about me, this is about what my purpose is. Lesson 3, we helped to identify that purpose. We learned why we were created, in order to make a dwelling place for God in the lower realms, the purpose of creation, and that everything in our lives is there to serve the Hashem's creation here. And then lesson 4, we talked about how this is effective even in time, and how everything in time as well has a purpose and a meaning. Everything in time is truly deeply meaningful. Now, the truth of the matter is that in Hebrew, there are 3 terms. These are used in Kabbalah a lot. So three terms. The words are used are olam, shana, nefesh. Olam means world. Shana means year, which means time. And nefesh means soul. So when we talk about nefesh, it's talking about each individual, right? So we talked about the purpose of each individual, primarily in lesson 2 and lesson 3, the purpose of each individual. Last week we talked about Shana, which means time. That's one of the reasons that Rosh Hashanah, although Shana we translate as year, but Shana also means to repeat the repetition of time. And then today we're going to talk about Olam, how it affects every aspect of the world, meaning every aspect of life, how that is dominating by this force, by this godly force. And what do I mean by that? So we could talk about how I could make a decision that I want to have a purposeful life, a meaningful life, but we know how things go. And that is that we all make decisions and we want to do things and we have everything planned. And then, boom, life changes. Life throws us a curveball. Things come unexpected. And we feel like we've been completely sidelined. So what am I supposed to do now? And so today we're going to talk about what happens when things don't necessarily go the way that we expect them to. Now, I do want to be very clear. This is not a lesson on tragedy. This is not a lesson on why do bad things happen to good people. We've talked about all those things in other lessons, and we sure will in other opportunities. We talked about, we had, of course, the wrestling with faith where we talked about it, Warrior to Warrior, we talked about it. So there are many opportunities where we discussed that, but that's not the purpose of today's lesson. Today's lesson is just simply how do we deal with life when things happen to us, not necessarily bad things, just things that we feel that we're not completely in control of. And so how do we deal with that? So here's the question: can I find meaning in the things that I didn't choose? Put it in a very simple way. So these are things that are unexpected events, changes, disruptions, even blessings that come from the outside. Somebody wins the lottery. Did anyone win last night's lottery? Let me know. I'll take 10% for Chabad. But so sometimes good things happen. Maybe maybe you'll come across a good thing in your life that's unexpected. Your accountant says you actually made more money this year than you had thought, or whatever it is. So now the question comes: how do I deal with that picture that's taking place? So I'll let you do a quick exercise. 5.1, page 127. List 2 to 3 recent things you choose to do that felt meaningful. If it means someone visited someone in the hospital, spent time studying Torah, and then recent things that happened to you unexpected. Got stuck in traffic, you got a flight canceled, something like that. So, okay, I'll give another minute. So what you'll probably notice is that things that we choose to make meaningful tend to carry clearer meaning than the ones that just happen to us. When we're faced with certain life-changing disappointments, or losing a job, or enduring a relationship, or a child that needs some assistance, or even maybe the kid didn't get into the school of choice. So perhaps these things could really throw us off. And we don't think of those things as being meaningful. We think of them as being a nuisance. We got to get it out of the way. And so that's what we talk about. Today's lesson is about space. Olam. Olam literally means the world, but it means space. Everything in space, everything that takes place around us has meaning. So the question is, if we're not writing the script, then who is? And of course, say God is writing the script. But the truth is that this isn't a fringe idea or an advanced mystical concept. It's built into the most basic structure of Jewish belief. The 12th century, Maimonides, Rambam, you've all heard of him.
Yes.
Maimonides, he compiled, or I don't want to say he compiled, but it comes from him. The 13 principles of faith. Some people read these after prayers every day. The 13 principles of faith. Ani ma'amin, I believe. And so, Ani ma'amin, we all know the famous one, Ani ma'amin, b'vias HaMashiach, I believe in the coming of Mashiach, but there are other principles as well. One of them is Ani ma'amin, text number 1, page 128. Ani ma'amin, I believe in complete faith in the Creator, blessed be His name, is the Creator and guide of all created beings. He alone made, makes, and will make all things. He alone made, makes, and will make all things. So, on the most basic level, this means that God's a creator, and therefore, by definition, He's the most powerful of all creations. He retains full executive authority over everything that happens. He's watching to see if something is taking place. He's watching to see what's going on and even involved in making sure what's going on. Some people may think of this as like, a puppeteer who's running the puppets. We had, anybody remember Toby? Mm-hmm. And her friend Gail, they used to actually be puppeteers, which was actually quite fascinating. But we say there's a few terms in English. She's the omniscient, how do you pronounce that? Omnipotent and omnipresent, which means He knows everything, He can do everything, and He is everywhere. He's never in the dark, He's never overwhelmed, He's there for everything. So some people might think of this as like an air traffic controller. We all know recently, anybody who traveled about a month ago knows that if you got no air traffic controllers, you could have all the pilots, you could have all the planes, but they ain't going anywhere. And I personally experienced this by sitting 4 hours delay because of air traffic control. So some people see God as some master in the world and in the sky, controlling all the traffic, making sure everything is running smoothly. Well, problem is when you see God as a cosmic supervisor, then that may be one way of understanding the creation in a dynamic way. And the truth is that it's not only religious belief, but there are others that believe this as well. You see text number 2. This is from Dr. Lisa Miller. She led a team at a psychiatry lab at Columbia University Medical School. And she says like this, page 129, each of us is endowed with a natural capacity to perceive a greater reality and consciously connect to the life force that moves in, through, and around us. Whether or not we participate in a spiritual practice or adhere to a faith tradition, whether or not we identify as a religious or spiritual, our brain has a natural inclination towards a docking station for spiritual awareness. An awakened brain is available to all of us right here in our neutral circuitry. Thank you. But we have to choose to engage it. It's a muscle we can learn to strengthen and let atrophy. Atrophy. Thank you. So in other words, the human mind for connection is always seeking for something higher. Awareness of God isn't just learned what she's saying, but it's actually something that's innate. It's something that's naturally, each and every one of us are seeking for a higher presence, a divine presence. And this is coming, well, she's mostly probably Jewish, but this is coming obviously from a secular perspective. And so for all of us, all people, and especially for Jewish people, we believe we are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, we are believers as the children of believers. So faith is not only something that we have to be mindful of, but it's something that's in our DNA. The very essence of our identity is something that we live by day to day. But Jewish tradition actually reveals something deeper, and especially taught according to the Kabbalah, and even more through the Hasidic teachings, which, by the way, this week is the 19th of Kislev, which is the Rosh Hashanah for Hasidus. For many of these ideas that come here are the Rosh Hashanah, so to speak, for these ideas. We're going to have a small Farbrengen on Wednesday, 12:30, for those who want to participate, to talk about the meaning of Hasidus and what it means in our life. But we'll be talking about that as well today. So we say in our prayers like this, in the blessings of the Shema, for most of you who are there on time for the Shema prayer in the synagogue. Text number 3, HaMechadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamen ma'aseh v'reishis. In His goodness, God renews each day continually the act of creation, as it said, Le'osei gedolim, give thanks to God who makes great luminaries, for His kindness is eternal. Le'osei means He makes great luminaries, for His kindness is eternal. Ki lo'olam chasdo. Question is, what does it mean? He makes. Le'osei means He makes, continually making. It should have said la'asa, to the one that had made the great luminaries. So, this is a verse from Tehillim, a verse from Psalms, which we recite every day in our prayers. And what he's saying is that God is making the luminaries now, then, and always. In other words, that He has to clearly recreate this world and everything at every moment. In other words, luminaries is literally, it's talking about the sun and the moon. That's what it means, the luminaries, yeah. The light, yeah. But it exists not only because He's constantly bringing it into existence, but it's an ongoing process. In other words, it's not something that just came about and then He lets the wheel spin, but He has to constantly be there. But take a look at one of the great Kabbalistic masters, Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz, known as the Shalah, the Shnei Luchai Sabris. In one of the early Kabbalistic thoughts, the Shalah presents two views. The first one is what he calls a common view, that God created everything and then assigned celestial forces to manage the world. Each star, angel has jurisdiction over some aspects of reality, and according to this view, he says, the world now runs according to those systems. And then he rejects this view and calls it a misunderstanding of God's relationship to the world. Let's take a look. We'll read text number 4. The common understanding of how the heavenly forces operate is this: God, the blessed Creator, brought everything into being from absolute nothingness, and therefore has the power to do whatever He wills, even to override or suspend the natural order. At the outset, He assigned spiritual forces to govern the world, each one appointed over its own realm. The world continues to function according to these systems as if His hands were stepped back, except on such occasions when He chooses to intervene and override them. Until then, these forces operate through the power he originally placed within them at the time of creation. He says this is the first way of seeing it. But in truth, as it seems to me, our faith teaches otherwise. God, in his goodness, is constantly and deliberately renewing the act of creation every single day. His influence is ongoing and intentional. If for even a moment he were to withdraw this flow, everything would immediately dissolve into nothingness. All of existence would simply cease. So God doesn't just supervise nature, but God actually continue to give this life force every single day, every single moment, constantly recreate this life force in order for the world to exist. So why is that? So on the surface level, it sounds okay. The rabbi's giving us a nice theological belief. We'll accept it because we trust everything that he says, so it sounds good. But the truth of the matter is, in other words, let's take a step back. Probably the way most people believe is the first approach that we read in the Shalom, which is that God created the world and now allows the spiritual forces to run it, to let it go. So these are the two approaches. One-time creation, God created everything and then assigned celestial forces to manage the world. Or constant creation means God is constantly renewing the act of creation. His influence is ongoing and intentional. Now, you could say that in theory, it sounds like a nice idea to say that God's influence is constantly intentional. But first of all, as we're going to see, it's also could be understood logically. And number two, when we do understand it in that way, it will also play into our understanding of our purpose, and hence our conversation today. So this is what Chassidus actually argues, that it's logical. And this is where those trying to understand the difference in Chassidus and Kabbalah, Chassidus takes the concepts of Kabbalah and brings it down in a way that it's understandable even to a simple folk like myself to understand these ideas. I'm going to give you a good Kabbalistic term just for the fun of it. There's something called yesh miyesh and yesh me'ayin. Yesh miyesh I don't know what I wrote. I wrote myself a note and I can't read it. Anyway, okay. Yesh miyesh means the creation of something from something. Yesh means something. Yesh miyesh, something from something. Then there is yesh me'ayin, means something. Me'ayin means from nothing. So we take some pre-existing materials and we shape them. Coming Hanukkah, we're going to sing a song. I have a little dreidel. I made it out of clay. So if you want the dreidel to be made out of clay, you first need the clay. Otherwise, how can you make a dreidel out of clay? So that's called yesh miyesh. And we as humans only know of such a concept of something from something, because whatever we have in life is created from something. Then you have yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, which means there's nothing pre-existing created from nothing. They say, scientist says to God, we could create the world, we could figure it out. So God says, okay, go ahead. So he says, okay, let's just grab some earth. We're going to start working our magic. God says, no, you got to take your own earth. It doesn't work that way. So when we think about everything, we could only imagine an existence from something that's existing. But we can't imagine something that's existing from nothing. Because we actually can't even imagine nothing. The concept of nothing doesn't really even exist in our mind. So this is what text number 5, which is from the book of Tanya, which is the seminal work of Hasidus. And I will point this out again. I'll give another promo for an encouragement for those to begin studying the book of Tanya. You also have a special sale going on now for a book called Chayenu, which is a publication. So you probably saw it in the back, a publication which has the daily Torah study, the daily Chumash study, daily Torah study, the daily Tehillim, and the daily study of Tanya, which is the book of Hasidus, which is split up annually. The Torah is split up by the week. The Tehillim is split up by the month, and the Tanya is split up annually, and we begin the new annual cycle this Tuesday, which is the 19th of Kislev, as I mentioned, the Rosh Hashanah for Hasidus. There's also the daily study of Rambam, Maimonides, which is either a annual cycle or every 3 years, triennial, right? But this is it's a great opportunity. You get it shipped to your house every week, every month. You have a weekly publication. You can take that wherever you go, and you always have a book. It's all translated into English with some additional studies. So I strongly encourage you. I get no kickbacks for this. Just strongly encourage the study of Torah. So the book of Tanya, we begin. If you don't want to sign up for the publication, there's plenty of online classes for Tanya that you could get online. You go to Chabad.org, daily study. You could download an app on your phone, and you get a daily study. And so for those who want to begin learning Tanya, there's many classes. I have a few that I have online. I only have the first few chapters. Maybe we could change that. And if we have a good group, maybe we could start making a regular study of Tanya as well, which would be fantastic. But this is the seminal book, the work of Tanya, written by the first Chabad Rebbe, the Shnei Zalman of the Yati. Anyway, this is taken from the second section of Tanya, known as Shar HaYichud Va'amuna, which means the gate of oneness and faith. And he says like this, text number 5, that this idea offers a clear response to those who deny divine providence and the miracles of the Torah. Their mistake lies in a false comparison. They imagine that God's creation of the heavens and the earth is like a human craftsmanship. Just as a craftsperson might make a vessel and then walk away with the vessel remaining intact without the artisan's ongoing involvement, they assume the same is true of the world, that once created, it runs on its own. But they fail to see a critical difference. The humans create something. They're not creating from nothing. They just reshape existing material, like turning a piece of silver into a utensil. But God created the world out of absolute nothingness. That's a far greater wonder, even more astounding than the splitting of the sea. Take that miracle as an example. God used a strong east wind to split the sea, and the water stood like a wall. But if the wind had stopped for even a moment, the waters would have immediately returned to their natural state and flowed back down, and they would not have continued standing as a wall on their own. So how much more so with the creation itself, which is something from nothing, that is beyond nature, and an even greater miracle than splitting of the sea. If God were to stop sustaining the world for even a moment, God forbid, it would vanish into nothingness. The world continues to exist only because His creative energy is constantly present within it, giving it life every second. So, it's a very powerful idea, and what he's saying is that the reason that we imagine that God could step away is because we imagine that God created something from existence. But when it's something from nothing, it cannot exist without the constant life force being there. A simple analogy to this is the difference between a painting or a projection. Some of you may remember there's a thing called a projector, which we had in school. There's some school teachers here, and you would take this clear film, you put it on the projector and project it on the wall or the screen, and that was before we had this kind of projector. But this kind of projector, what happens? Block it, and it's hot as well, but right? There's nothing on the wall now. Why? Because you need a constant flow. If for a second you stop that flow, there's nothing else. As opposed to a painting on the wall or a picture, that's there. I could wave my hand a million times, it's still going to be there. Why? Because, I'm going to get to questions in a minute. Because when you have something that is constantly creating, that creation has to constantly be there. That life force has to constantly be there. Another more modern example, if you will, is when when you're using a computer, and the computer, whatever we see in the front of the computer, is actually being operated by a certain code in the background that is telling it what to do. If you have even one letter that's off in that code, you're going to get an error message, because you constantly have to have that code flowing in the right way. So when we say that God writes the script, it means in the most literal sense, he's not just approving the plot line, but he's composing it every single moment. God is creating the world moment by moment. And that changes everything, the way we view the events that we didn't choose. Getting back to our original discussion here. Because if something is being created at that very moment, then that also means that it's intended for this very moment, for this very person, for this very individual, in what this thing happens. And if it's intended, then it must be there is a purpose. That's not something we need to guess or feel, but we can be certain on it, because if we believe, and based on this, it's actually not only belief, but it's also a simple understanding. So the only difference between like a constant flow of light, or in the case of God creating the world, is that with the light flow, so the source of the light doesn't actually go there. The source of the light is here, but that's a reflection of the light. But when it comes to God creating the world, God is actually within the creations as well. In other words, he's here with the very created beings all the time. And it just seems we can't, he covers up his identity, but God's existence is here all the time, and that allows the world to exist. Now I'm going to take questions. Yes?
Where is he? As we know it now, we have been for the last 50 years.
Okay.
With the third interstellar object coming through our solar system and getting 183 million miles away from Earth, which is 3 hours. It has given off, based on our evaluation of physics, gases, and supposedly reduce in size by the amount of gas it was giving off. However, in interstellar, it now has greater weights than it did before. And it may be getting that weight from interstellar space in our solar system, not against our physics, but our physics is limited.
Okay, so what's your point?
In this spaceship, there is something that we don't know.
Okay.
Calling it godliness.
God created those gases as well.
But God created the growing this object from interstellar space that we consider nothingness.
Okay.
it is something.
Truth, true.
God is involved in that something of that we don't know and don't.
That's true. That's true. The biggest identifiers of God are scientists, even though they don't want to believe that. But yes. Yeah, we're gonna continue on, explain that a little bit more in depth. Yeah, okay. Yes, right,
He ordered it down.
right.
So there was something before God.
No, the chaos is part of creation as well. According to Kabbalah, that chaos actually is there serving a purpose in creation. When we talk about the chaos is not really the most accurate word. What it is that there were incredible energy lights, but the vessels weren't there to contain them. And so that's what we call in Kabbalistic terms, Shviras HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. But that is part of creation, and that serves a purpose as well.
Is that to recreate because he is in a sense controlling the chaos.
Well, again, you're assuming that it's like things are going wild and he has to create it and he has to control it. I'm saying when we study it, when we learn that concept of what you're referring to as chaos, that is part of creation. What God is saying is there's two aspects of creation. There's an aspect of creation which everything fits, and there's an aspect of creation where things don't necessarily work, but that is part of creation as well.
The version where things create from
100%. That's part of God's creation. Now, in other words, the assumption when reading it, just on a surface level, is there was sort of this mistake, and then God had to control it and put it together. No, that is part of it as well.
but it all seemed to me that we need to treat every day that we need to have a plan in recreating our own spaces, even as
Right. If everyone did everything perfectly according to the rules, there would never be any innovation, right? Yes.
that whole we look at negative things as chaos, but I think that God puts those negatives in front of us as a learning and as teaching and as a growth to positive. So what you're calling chaos, I'm calling what we consider a little negative here. But it really is his way of saying to us, okay, we're through this, this is it. Well, learn from it. And that's it's not really chaos. It's a teaching point. So if there was chaos, it's hard to say because there was nothing, you think there's nothing, but if there was supposedly the chaos that you're talking about in the beginning, it wasn't chaos. It was just him doing a little bit of negative to get to the positive. And I really believe that that's how we learn.
Well, yeah. I don't want to get too lost in this one particular issue, but it's also that there's two aspects of creation. So take for example, if a parent has two types of children, there's a child that's regular, keeping everything in normally, and then you have a child that's special needs, and then they'll find out that child that special needs has certain certain abilities that's outside of the norm, but incredibly capable in certain other areas. So I don't want to get caught up in this. I need to continue on. Okay, one more quick question. Yes.
Can you rephrase to what are the spiritual forces?
What do you mean, what are they?
Yes.
They're godliness. I can't go into detail now explaining what each one is, but they're godly forces that are constantly recreating the world every moment.
Okay.
Yes.
To follow up from what you said, tonight we celebrate Zoom, there's a short documentary film, a 30-minute film called
Okay. Oh wow, that's very interesting. Thank you for that. Okay. Okay. Okay.
We're from an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson, two Jewish astronauts whose names could probably fly with focus.
All right. So Marcy will share the information with whoever wants after the class. We're going to watch a video now.
You notice the way he stands. His outfit, his jacket. You notice the gun on his belt, a symbol of honor. But you didn't think he'd use it. Well, you should have, at least according to a rule known as Chekhov's gun. Anton Chekhov, 19th century Russian playwright, taught that in a written story, every detail must serve. You can that you hang a pistol on the wall, HP narrative and otherwise, don't put it there. In a masterful story, nothing is accident. Every drop has a purpose. Every line carries meaning. But nothing is random. Is there a storyteller more masterful than the creator of the universe? Is there any story more layered than the one you're living? One of Judaism's oldest mystical texts, Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, describes God as a divine scribe, creating reality into being. We're not just characters in the story. We are. And just like a screen goes black when the projector stops, the world depends on God right in the moment. Creation isn't a one-time event. It's continuous, intentional, going. Constant waiting leads. Good story, right? Every event, every detail now. Being created. Choice. It's here. Look, totally random. Even horribly random. Tools to speak. To live with purpose. Even when flawed with.
All right, let's continue on. So to fully appreciate this and how purposeful every event is, let's go a bit deeper. We're going to take this even more. The Baal Shem Tov famously spoke at length and often about the idea of what we know in Hebrew as hashgacha pratis, commonly translated as divine providence. Many of you have probably heard me use this term, hashgacha pratis, divine providence. Every single detail is by divine design. As once we accept this concept that God is creating the world constantly from nothing, so everything that's there is willed and guided by Him. And so if we exist, it's because He wants it to. If there is something in our life that exists, it's because He wants it to. But divine providence isn't really fully an accurate translation. Hashgacha pratis, hashgacha is like from the word mashgiach, means someone that's watching. And so you have someone in a restaurant that's the mashgiach of the restaurant, overseeing it. Divine providence means that it's hashgacha pratis, means it's detailed, it's particular, it's individual, and even personal. Let's take a look at text number 6, where there's a story from the previous Rebbe about the Baal Shem Tov seeing a leaf that fell on the ground. Baal Shem Tov explains that even a piece of straw or a torn leaf rolling in the streets is subject to divine judgment. There's a decree for exactly how many times it should turn over, where it should roll, and in which place it should end up. So imagine for a second you see, walking down the street and you see a leaf blowing right in front of you. It's the sudden gust of wind, and you see that leaf either falls off the tree. We don't have such great falls here, but you see the leaf falling off the tree, and it's then another wind comes and blows it to the side. So nobody notices, nobody cares, but God does. Not only does he notice it, he authored it. Many times as a turnover, where it should go, which corners it should end up. The famous song written by a Jewish singer, where he sings how the leaf falls down, and it's because there was a little ant that was crawling on the ground and prayed to God and said, "It's too hot for me, give me some shelter." And the leaf falls, it goes into the detail, and God tells the angel to tell the wind to blow, to tell the branch to blow the branch, to move the leaf, that the leaf should fall off, and then be able to protect the ant that needed protection. But anyway, that's just an example. It could be many things, but you're outside doing some landscaping, suddenly the clouds get dark and it starts to pour. And I know many times here, it could be pouring here or across the street. It's nothing going on. So you say, wow, it's incredible weather. Or another way to see it is, well, maybe there's a reason that it's raining here specifically and not across the street. Maybe there was someone that had needed that rain, and maybe someone else that did not need that rain. So there could be many instances that we don't always see the full picture, but we have to know that we're always part of that full picture, and the full picture exists. So you accept that the storm had a purpose, that it blows the winds around, it blows the leaves around. Maybe even there was some damage, maybe collateral damage. We know about that in Florida, especially now when I'm trying to renew my insurance. But God is supervising everything to make sure that there is no real harm, but everything has its storyline and its purpose. This is what it means, hashgacha pratis, which is individual. Individual means every individual thing, even that fly that was just flying right here, has a purpose and a meaning. So it's not only the storm that has a purpose, but everything within the storm, everything that's affected, everything that comes about from it. It's something that's not only there, but it is there to affect me and my life and my personal life. So for example, if the stock market crashes or surges, it's not only that there's a larger vision involved or for whatever reason, but God wants the economy to tank or to grow, but there's something there. And the entire stock market at that moment is for one particular individual to either have gained or have lost in that particular situation of what took place. Another example, we remember a couple of years ago, 2020, we had planned a wonderful trip to Israel. It was about to be our first trip to Israel as a community, and we were going to have a speaker that same month to come speak. Eva Schluss, she was all scheduled to come. It was going to be one of our biggest events that we ever had. And then COVID hit. COVID affected billions of people on the planet. Regardless of how anybody felt about the situation, the fact is billions of people were affected by it. And some people lost loved ones. Some unfortunately were bereaved. Some have illnesses affected by it. and some were affected in other ways, just having to be home, the weddings and simchas being disrupted, kids not being able to go to school. And obviously God had a reason for it, although we may not understand the reason for it, but there was everyone had something that they were able to take out from the situation and say that I was able to, and to be able to tune into why God did that particular situation for them, why I had to have my kids home, why I had to not have our in-laws come for Pesach that year. It was the only Pesach since we started doing Pesach that we did alone with our family. I think already the next year we already did another public Seder. So many people were affected in different ways, and it's not vaguely or passively, but intentionally by design, with care for every single individual, every single flight that had been canceled, every single trip that had to be postponed. Something was there with a reason and a purpose for it. The same way he decides how many times a leaf should spin in the gutter, he decided how many times your work schedule should be flipped, how many Zoom meetings have to be cut off, or how many birthdays had to be celebrated on FaceTime, or my daughter who had a bas mitzvah that had to take place in a tent, which actually ended up being the next one was also in a tent, so it didn't really matter. But so not only did God craft the global event, he scripted every local consequence. That's the line. We're going to get to questions soon. So we have to finish this. So far we've been focusing on this one powerful implication of Hashgacha Pratis, that you're never just in the background of someone else's story. If something happens to you, it's not just a side effect. God is doing something important for someone else. It's part of your personal script. But then there's another layer to this whole idea. And that is even more transformative. You watch this TV commercial, but there's more. And that is, even when it's clear that you are the central character in the moment, the details that happen are also part of that too. Every detail of your life may seem minor, sometimes frustrating, maybe good, maybe purely circumstantial, but is written with an intention. Everything even that cough, everything that you come across, the way that inspiration comes about matters. If you are meant to grow through the challenge, maybe specifically shape you through what happened. If you had to if you had to miss that plane, if you were not wearing the shoes that you wanted, if you ended up having to take a specific bag that you had not planned to take, but you took a different one, or taking the one that you had meant to take, that you had thought to take. The fact that you were standing at that particular seat in the airport by that particular gate at that moment. It may all seem just arbitrary, but the truth of the matter is it's meant to be. If for whatever reason we couldn't pray in the morning because it was too early, we had to pray in that time, in that place. The story is about you. The story has to unfold in that way. We have here three scenarios, which I'm not going to read them all. Actually, I'm not going to read any of them. I'm going to let you read them on your own. But there's three scenarios. One, you're sitting in the airport and the screen flashes, the flight is delayed 3 hours. You have a Hashgacha Pratis, which is one mindset, which is there must be a reason. Hashgacha Pratis mindset number one, there must be a reason that is meant for me. Hashgacha Pratis mindset number two, there must also be a reason for all the details in the situation, which is that you're sitting at the exact gate at that time, Maybe there is a woman that's sitting next to me that I needed to meet. Maybe there's something I needed to learn at that time. Everybody saw there's an NFL commercial that just came out where a guy is sitting by a gate and he's sitting and looking on his phone, and they announce your flight is delayed another hour. And he says, "Yay!" And everyone around is looking at him. Why are you so excited? And they come and they realize he's watching a football game on his phone. And then she announces, actually, it's going to be delayed another hour. And then the whole crowd says, "Yay!" So yeah, it could be something at that moment that's going on that was for someone that you had to come across in that particular situation, that particular case. Or another scenario, you're looking for a new house in the area, you love to move, but you cannot find the house to fit your needs. The only house you find in your price range fails inspection, or someone else outbids you, or maybe someone else needed the house. That's the hashgacha pratis mindset. It means for someone else. The second one is it's not only there for a reason, the house didn't work out. There's a reason that I am being blocked. And then there's also something that I am able to come by the fact that I had to meet that particular agent at that moment, even though I wasn't going to get the house, but I had to go through the process to be told to look at the house so that I could meet that agent at that moment, at that time, or someone else that happened to be walking in the street while I was at the house to look at it, even though I didn't end up buying it. Or you're rushing out the door of the office, juggling your keys and your phone. Right outside your building, you spill your coffee all over yourself. You're frustrated. You're late. Your clothes are stained. So one is, well, there must be some good purpose. Another mindset is there has to be a reason why I'm late. The other one is there's a reason why specifically why I actually needed to spill my clothing. And it's not just that something bad happened, so hopefully something good will come out of it. But there's actually this entire process is something that's good. You could, of course, make your own scenarios. But this is the very deepest way of understanding the concept of hashgacha pratis, that every detail, every turn, every way, everything that happens is all part of this scenario that's playing out in my life at this moment, putting it all together. Okay, I'm going to take briefly questions because we're running late. You had a question? That's a great question. I'm not going to address that right now. No, no. It's a good question. It's more of a philosophical question, right? Because at the end of the day, it's at the end of the day, it's a philosophical question, and there are answers to it, but I just don't have time to address that now. If you want after the class, I could address that. What?
You're talking about situations where you can make good out of what happens, but what about that? COVID killed people, floods killed people. What do you take from that?
Your question is, why do the bad things happen? Which again is another it's another layer to the discussion, which is again asking why it happened, what happened. But over here, right. So again, that's also a philosophical question, which is why did it happen? And what we're discussing now is not why it happened, but what is my approach to it? And that is a good question. It's a good question, why, but it's not our particular conversation right now.
How do you approach?
Well, how do you approach is different than why did God allow it to happen? If you believe that there is something good and there's good into what's going on and everything is good, now for me, the only question is, how do I approach the situation? How do I make best of the situation? Why God allowed it to happen? Well, the real answer is so that I could use the situation out in the right way. I mean, we had the example of Rabbi Lee Raz in the beginning, right? He lost his legs, and he said, God wants me to now direct my life in a different way than it was till now, and to use this situation in that way. Now we can argue, we want everything to be perfect. Okay, but that's a separate discussion as to, again, why bad things happen is a separate situation. We're now trying to understand the circumstance as a whole. Oh, yes?
Why is this book asking us to think at deepest level? Things that happen at level 3, not it happened to me at third level where we go into the details. Every nature in my life is that what this.
So yes, I mean the truth is that it's hard to implement this concept and immediately, but it's something we have to work on in our lives. And if we do try to reframe our approach to everything in life, then we'll have a more peaceful life, a calmer life, more meaningful life, and a more purposeful life. If we realize that every single thing that's happening in my life, good or bad, is there for me to use it out in the right way that God wants me, and I'm going to soon go through one of 3 different scenarios that each situation could be for specifically. But when we're taking that approach, then our life is completely different. Like, for example, I was recently, I was I had scheduled to go meet with a particular attorney, a Jewish guy, downtown to go put up mezuzahs in his office. Okay, so I went to him. I scheduled for a certain time, and I come in, Mr. So and so. Let me look. I mean, he's not here. He's not in the office. I said I scheduled to meet with him. Okay, after the woman at the desk. I'm sorry, the what's it called the secretary. Okay, I'm going to call her and find out. Okay, so he calls. It says, "Oh, he's supposed to meet." I said I thought he was going to come at 12:30. He said he's going to come. He's not going to be here until 1:30. Okay, and I'm already downtown Ocala. What am I going to do now until he shows up? Well, the first thing is I noticed that the woman across from me was the secretary was wearing a chamsa, which is a Jewish. I said, "Are you Jewish?" She said, "No." I said, "Do you know that what you're wearing is a Jewish symbol?" She said, "No, it's just a good luck symbol." I said, "Okay, well, it's based on Kabbalah." But anyway, I don't know what happened from that, but obviously there was meant to be some sort of meeting with this particular secretary at that time, and then I'm trying to find out. So what do I do for the next hour? So I left my stuff there. I told her, I asked her where the bathroom was, but I started walking around, and I started looking at the names of the other. Maybe there's another attorney here that's maybe Jewish. Turns out there wasn't somebody that's Jewish, but there's another attorney that we happen to be working with. That's a particular situation that we're working on, and I had no idea he was in that office. And I went there and I walked in, and he happened to be there at that time, and we were able to discuss the case that he's working on. When I came back, the Jewish attorney was there. She said, "Wow, what took so long in the bathroom?" But anyway, so this was just a simple scenario, which I could have said, okay, whatever. Either I'll just go home, or I'll just sit down and sleep for the next hour. But I said no. There has to be something why I'm meant to be here at this time. I thought it would be for something more. Who knows what it was for specifically, but it ended up being that I was able to connect with someone that I had not expected to meet at all. But in every moment, if we see life in this way, then that completely affects us in a positive way. So the truth is that this really changes everything, because we know that whatever happens to us is for a reason and a purpose. And so, in other words, it's not only that I have to do something, but whatever is happening to me, good or bad, is for a purpose. So you receive your a way to look at it is, imagine if you're a soldier and you're on a mission. You receive your briefing. You have a critical task. You see this a lot of times with those that are like in espionage, and their job is to go into a certain scenario, into a certain situation, and to take in all the information of whatever is going on around them. And they're basically told your mission is going to unfold as you're there. You got to be there. And your mission is unfolding there. And God is putting us every day in that mission. It's not vague. We're told clearly in advance. We have to serve God, and it could be one of three things. Either it's so we could do a mitzvah, either with ourselves or with someone else, or that we could become more refined. We could refine our character to become a better person. Maybe a lesson that I could learn from a situation or a person that I met or saw, or to help someone. Maybe someone needs our help, and I had to be in that situation, that time, in that moment. But while the mission is clear, the assignment is sort of open-ended. In other words, God is saying, these are the divine opportunities, and he's basically saying, watch what happens. The clues are there, and the mission is going to reveal itself in real time. If we allow ourselves to be in tune to the spiritual effects of what's taking place. So we're meant to read the signs. A sudden delay, an unexpected counter, getting in the wrong line in a grocery store, what we thought was the wrong line. These are things that are constantly affecting our life. And this is God writing the script for us, telling us, you got it, you're in the moment, you're in the time, make the right use of this particular situation. One second. And sometimes the answer is obvious. Maybe there's a neighbor that needs help. Maybe we meet someone that's clear that I had not expected that. Other times it may be more subtle. Mission isn't somewhere else. It's exactly where you are. You don't need to control the script. The script is being there, but the question is what's being asked of me. And as much as we try to live with our eyes wide open, things don't always go as planned. And so there could be situations where we don't always see it. But if we're in a good, optimistic spirit, then we're able to see things positively. This is what's called motivational coping. To have a flexible goal adjustment. And when a particular goal becomes unattainable, seems to be that we can't get there. So we have to reframe the situation and find things in a different light, in a different way, and to use it in a constructive way. And so even after we do our part, we pay attention, we show up, we have to search for the meaning of that particular situation. I'm sorry, I really don't have time for questions. Well, okay, so.
It should be the Venn diagram where they all three blend touch each other, plus all of them that serve God completely.
True.
It's about.
True. But the truth of the matter is that sometimes we may not even know what we were able to accomplish in that particular situation. We may not even come across the effects of it. So for example, text number 7. Beth Kurland writes, on the day of my mother's funeral, I remember sitting in the back seat of our car, pulling into the parking lot where the service was going to be held, and seeing 2 old friends of mine from elementary school walking inside. I was 15 at the time. It never occurred to me that they would miss school to be there for me. The simple act of support meant more to me than they will ever know. So just them showing up had so much meaning. Another example is a talk that the Rebbe once gave in 5715 to 20 in 1965. He said as follows: my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe Yosef Schneerson, instituted several years ago that during the summer months, yeshiva students would volunteer to travel from yeshiva to various Jewish communities in order to inspire their fellow Jews in matters of Torah, mitzvahs, and Judaism in general. Presumably, the yeshiva students have already decided to embark on the mission in a good and auspicious hour. May the trip be not only peaceful, but also successful. Not just successful in a general sense, but remarkably successful in all areas which they speak. and even areas which they won't speak, but will influence simply through their very presence in these places. There's a story that illustrates this. He said, a Jew living in a small American town was deeply affected just by the sight of a young man walking by wearing a full beard and payas, side locks, and tzitzis visible. Curious, the man asked where this young man was from. Was he from Poland, Galicia, or Ukraine? He was told, no, he's actually born and bred in Boston. Now, in this country, Bostonians were regarded as being among the most distinguished. I mean, this was 1965. Maybe things have changed since then, but anyway, so this man was shocked to learn that even a Bostonian could look like that, beard, payas, visible tzitzis, and yet speak fluent English and speak with intelligence and clarity about deep concepts like the various levels of divine unity discussed in the mystical works. And this had an effect on the observer. First of all, the yeshiva fundraiser came to visit town after the young man. He benefited from this man who gave him several extra dollars. But even more significantly, it opened him up to making changes in his own life. Firstly, in the area of keeping kosher, and gradually in other areas of practical mitzvah observance. And most likely, the young man who set all this in motion had no idea that any of it ever happened. So this is incredible that we could affect people in ways we don't even know, just by our very being, just by our very identity, just by walking down the street sometimes. Someone sees us, someone sees someone else, or we may see someone else. And that has an incredible effect. So this is the example of the straws that we gave, the straw or the leaf falling down. It doesn't mean we stop searching. Our task is to seek every moment, to ask why I'm here and what can I do about it. And if the answers don't come, the meaning is invisible. So, well, we try and use it for the best situation that we have, to try and use it in the best way that we can. But everything in life has to have a reason. Everything in life has to have a purpose. And we have to always look to use it out. I'm going to share a quick personal story. There's a lot more details to it. When we were still living in Ocala, my wife and I decided that we wanted to start doing once a month a Shabbos in the villages. And so we came for one Shabbos. We rented out we stayed at the hotel in the Lady Lake, the Town Place Suites. And they gave us a room to be able to hold our Shabbos services. And then we also stayed there. I think it was just maybe Mati and Mendy were born then. And we were going to do a first Shabbos in the villages. Well, we even had a cholent that we brought with us, and the whole room smelled like cholent. And I think they unplugged it in the morning. But then we brought all our food and everything. We were going to set up. It was quite a trip. Anyway, when we got there were relatively very few people that showed up, and it was somewhat disappointing for us. Regardless of the details of the story, not years later, but someone started coming, and he would start coming slowly. First he would drive occasionally to Shul on Shabbos, and then eventually he stopped, and he became fully Shabbos observant, and he even became a full Chabadnik. He has a beard and the payas and tzitzis and everything, and he even wears a long coat on Shabbos as I do. And I one time in a conversation, I was talking to him and saying, going back to when we first met him, and he says, the first time I ever met you was when you made Shabbos in the villages, and that was the first time I was ever there, and I was so impressed and inspired that I wanted to start keeping Shabbos myself. And so this was something that we thought was an abysmal failure. And yet someone's life was completely changed from that situation. So that's just a small story that I wanted to share. Not always do we know. We got to do our part and let things play out. So just to bring this around full circle, we explored how every moment of life is purposeful. And sometimes even not so noticeable things. Sometimes things could be quiet to seemingly trivial, but everything has an intended purpose and a reason and a divine design. And now we're coming to a deeper idea, that one that is not only maybe difficult to internalize, but there's a purpose behind everything that happens to you, as we said, but even more so. But to take it even more, and that is that it affects the entire world around you. Everything is arranged and supported for your mission. The entire world, your home, your town, your bus driver, your classmates, your friends, your golf buddies, your golf car guy, everyone around you, the ones that you're playing with mahjong, everything there is all part of this greater purpose. In other words, it's not only the event that matters, but it's a fact that you became aware of it too, depending on the event, means that you're very knowing the situation. Just knowing that you have been led to be part of something means that you're meant to be part of writing God's script. So it's not just that everything that happens to me is for a purpose, but there's a ripple effect and a consequence, and those events are all intentional. And now the third layer is that your awareness of it is actually part of the plan as well. In other words, your consciousness, being aware of something, is also part of it. Text number 9. Everything that God created in his world has a purpose. He did not create a single thing in vain. Same is also true of all events and occurrences in the world. Nothing happens in vain. Everything is under divine providence. As a result of this, the world, meaning in the personal world of each and every individual, there exists only God and the person. Everything else is merely a means through which the individual fulfills their service of God. Anything that does not pertain in their service of God is something that they have no awareness of, for there is nothing for there is no thing or awareness that is in vain. The entire world, one's personal world, is nothing more than a tool and a medium through which they can reach their purpose. The ultimate goal is for which they were created. And this leads us to the following conclusion, which is text number 10, as the Baal Shem Tov says, every single thing that one sees or hears is an instruction for their conduct in the service of God. This is the idea of avodah, service, to comprehend and discern in all things a way in which. So this was the very transformative idea of the Baal Shem Tov, that everything that happens in our life, everything that we're involved with in life, everything that we hear, everything that we see, everything that comes to our life in any way was meant to not only for me to see it, but that it should be a way that I could help, that I could utilize that particular fact of knowledge, of sight, or something that physically comes to me in order to serve God in a proper way. So anything that we see, hear, or notice is all part of the message. And this totally reframes the innocent events that's characterized in everyday life. It transforms us and makes an incredibly purposeful experience. So for an example, you get onto an airplane and you're sitting next to a stranger. So you may have gone through one of these classics, either be mildly irritated by the dream of having thought that I have a full road to myself and I don't, or pop an earbud into my ear and just completely ignore it, or if you're the social type, to strike up a conversation. But over here, we're saying, no, it's not random. The fact that that specific individual sat next to me at that particular time is for a meaning and purpose. I could give you a myriad of examples, but I don't have the time for it now. You could walk in a store and the cashier, and you're in a particular line. Or maybe you may notice that the cashier looks annoyed. Maybe there's something that's bothering her or him, and no one bothered to ask. There's a Publix over here has one cashier that's always joyful, positive. He always says it's a great day, and he's so happy to be working there every day. I remember Vivian, you said you always had the longest lines in Walmart because people always love to get in your line to have a conversation with you. So you find, or another example is maybe you walk in a little early, and you see you're the first one here, and wonder why did I come here? What am I doing here? And then think to yourself, instead of just letting it go, think to yourself, maybe it's going to give me a moment to reflect. Maybe the next person that's going to walk through the door is meant just for me and them to have a special conversation that I did not have until now. Or, there's so many things that could happen in our life if we constantly change our perception and say, no, let me see why am I seeing this? Why is this taking place in my life now? Why is what am I meant to see here? Then that completely changes everything. And so this is the big takeaway here, that everything that happens, if we live in the moment, instead of thinking, how do I get through this? Let's think, how do I take advantage of this? Instead of, the question was, what's the personal meaning behind this moment? And we have to look, we have to scan, we have to think, we have to look for clues of what God is telling us. Everyone has their different circumstances and situation that God puts them through, not only as a life as a whole, but every single moment, every single place, every single day where we end up with, God is telling you, you have something in this moment, at this time, in this situation, to accomplish something. And this mindset is really transformational. This was taught, I'm not making it up, this is what the Baal Shem Tov is teaching us. The founder of Hasidic teachings is teaching us. That suddenly every event, big or small, carries purpose. It's not just something happened, but it's there with a purpose and a reason. And I have to be the one in this specific situation to make that come about. And now, one second, we're really short on time. I just want to finish here. What happens if you become aware of someone else's flaws? If someone is doing something that you feel is not appropriate. So it's not because God wants you to feel superior. Something has to happen in that particular situation. Now it's hard to say specifically what that may be. Sometimes it may be that's something, to avoid it. But it could also be sometimes maybe someone needs help. Maybe someone needs help, and this is the way that it's coming to you. Sometimes we acknowledge for ourselves, and to know that we have to keep away from it and keep a healthy distance. But sometimes it's for that situation, for that purpose, for that person, not to be judging or condescending, but to take care of them in that situation. One example in the Torah of this is text number 11. It's the story of Noah. After the flood, it said Noah began to farm and planted a vineyard. He drank from the wine, became drunk, and lay exposed in the tent. Sam, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers outside. Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it across their shoulders, and walked backwards to cover their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So the simple question here is, why is it a double expression? It says their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So obviously, if their faces are turned away, then they didn't see. So the answer, the Rebbe explains a beautiful answer, and he says this is actually two different points. One point is that their faces were turned away, meaning that's a physical orientation. They're saying they did not want to see this situation. But another one is what they did see, they did not see their father's nakedness, meaning that's the attitude, saying they didn't see him in a judgmental way. They saw him as someone that needed help and took care of him, as opposed to Chum, who saw his father's nakedness, meaning he saw him he saw him as a vulnerable situation and took advantage of that vulnerable situation, as opposed to the brothers who said, no, this is an individual that needs help, that got himself into trouble. How can we make it better, not worse? And so this is the idea of, and sometimes someone may tell you something, And you have to internalize that message and say, why am I hearing that message at this particular time? So God shows us what we need to see. God tells us what we need to hear. And, it's, for example, if you see someone drowning, so you could say, oh, well, what an idiot. Why did he jump in the water? Or you could say, oh, maybe he needs help getting out. And so this is an incredible lesson, as Paul Harvey would say. Now you know the rest of the story. I'm just going to read. I'm just going to conclude with the following story. It's not in your book, but I'm going to read it. This is from the previous Rebbe. He writes this in his diaries. He writes, "It was the summer of 1896, and I was walking with my father, the Rebbe Shalom Dober Schneerson, the Rebbe Rashab, through the fields. The grain was tall and ripe, swaying gently in the breeze. Even the tiniest blades of grass and the stalks of grain moved with the wind. My father turned to me and said, 'Look closely. Every single moment and every blade of grass, every stalk is included in the original divine thought that shaped all of creation. Each motion is watched by the eye that sees all generations. There is a divine intent in every detail. Nothing just happens.' We continued walking into the woods. I was deep in thought about what my father had just told me about Hashgacha Pratis. As we passed a tree, I absentmindedly plucked a leaf without really thinking. I held it in my hand. As we walked, I crumpled it, twisted it, tore it into pieces, and dropped the shredded pieces along the path. Suddenly, my father spoke again. 'You should know,' he said, 'that even a single leaf is a creation of Hashem. It has a soul, a divine spark sent into the world for a purpose. Hashem made this leaf as part of the blueprint of creation. It has a life and a mission. And now think, how can a person treat something like that so casually?' My father continued, 'There's a big difference between someone who is awake or someone who is asleep. When we are asleep, our inner faculties, our intellect and emotions go dim. Only our outer functions remain. That is why dreams are such a strange mixes of opposites. You can clearly see when you're asleep. And that's the test. Are you awake or are you asleep? When a person is awake, he sees godliness in everything. When he's asleep, he sees nothing at all. Just moments ago, we're speaking about divine providence and how even the smallest details are guided by God. Without even noticing, you picked a leaf, crushed it and tore it, and tossed the pieces into every direction. This is how we treat something that God created, something with a purpose and a soul.' It's with this inspiration that the previous Rebbe led an entire generation through the Soviet Russia, and then moving on to the United States, changing an entire generation. And so we have to open up our eyes. We have to be awake. We have to see everything that happens in our lives and see that it's really there for a purpose and a reason. When we live our life in this way, it's truly, really transformational. And I want to say, before we watch the key points, in your book on page 148, there's a few beautiful stories that are really very inspiring, and I highly encourage you to read them. So we're not going to read them here, but I highly encourage you to read them on page 148, those stories.
Zehira is a Chabad emissary to Nachal Israel.
Sorry, wrong
and
one.
services students in Jerusalem campuses. Meaning unchosen. 1. When a human artisan forms an object from existing materials, the object exists independently of the artisan. However, when God creates something from nothing, it can only exist because God is constantly willing it. The principle of divine providence, as taught by the Baal Shem Tov, means that every single occurrence is specifically guided by God for a reason. God doesn't only craft global events, he also scripts every local consequence, and does so with intent and purpose. 3. We're not given a checklist to find our purpose, but we are given clues, subtle warnings, hidden in the flow of daily life. Our mission will always involve doing amidst helping up a growing person. The more attuned we are, the more we recognize those divine cues. 4. Meaning doesn't depend on our ability to see it. Even when we don't understand why something is happening, it still has purpose. Often, we fulfill our mission without ever realizing it. It doesn't make it any less real. If something enters your awareness, it's part of your mission. That awareness is intentional and meant to guide you. We should see ordinary events not as things that we need to navigate or leverage, but as opportunities packed with personal meaning. 6. If God shows you someone's weakness, it's not so you can gossip or judge. It's so you can help. Your awareness is intentional, and it comes with the responsibility. Support.
Okay, next final lesson. And next week, by the way, is also Hanukkah. So make sure that you are prepared. If you need menorahs and stuff, we'll have them available as well. And thank you everyone for joining. 1 second, let me just. Yeah, I'm not.
I'm sure I can.